Welcome back to the quiet corridors of the Grand Pineview Mall. Before we continue our walk through this snowy night, let us remember where we left off. It is Christmas Eve, 1985. A heavy snowstorm has sealed the doors of the mall, locking the world outside. Inside, the gentle night watchman, Arthur Pendergast, was on his usual rounds when he discovered something unusual in the Gilded Toy Emporium. The owner, Mr. Christopher Haynes, was found in a deep, unnatural slumber, possibly poisoned, or perhaps ... enchant. The only clue, a half-eaten gingerbread cookie and the silence of the antique trains. Now, as the clock chimes midnight, Arthur turns his flashlight toward the shadowy back office. Let's join him and see what secrets the snow has hidden. "I used to," Doran said finally. "We worked together a long time ago. We move in different circles now." Miss Marple let the silence hang in the air for a moment. "Sad business, that," he added eventually, shifting his weight. "A real shame you hadn't spoken recently, then?" she asked. "No?" She smiled faintly. "You don't seem terribly surprised that he is dead, Mr. Doran?" Doran stared hard at her, his expression unreadable. "People die, madam," he said coldly. He gave a short, dismissive nod. "Some people burn their bridges. It's only a matter of time before they find themselves standing in the fire." Miss Marple thanked him politely, purchased a small, ugly porcelain rabbit figurine she didn't need and certainly didn't want, and left the shop. Outside, the winter wind cut colder than the day before. She pulled her coat tighter around her neck and glanced down at the figurine, wrapped in brown paper in her hand. She hadn't bought it for its aesthetic value. She had bought it because, just like the broken cup fragment in Mr. Haynes's satchel, the underside of this rabbit bore the faintest, almost invisible trace of a white powder. It was the same kind of residue that clings to unwashed fingers after handling something like pure digitoxin extract. Miss Jane Marple did not believe in coincidences, especially not this close to a murder. Back at the bungalow, the porcelain rabbit sat on Miss Marple's side table, its vacant painted eyes catching the dull morning light. Lucy examined it with a critical frown. "It's not exactly charming, is it?" she said. "Looks like something you'd find in a charity shop clearance bin." Miss Marple stirred her mid-morning tea, watching the milk swirl into the dark liquid. "I didn't buy it for charm, dear. I bought it for fingerprints." Lucy blinked in surprise. "You think Mr. Doran handled it right after poisoning Haynes?" "I believe Mr. Doran is very nervous," Miss Marple replied gently. "Not guilty of murder necessarily, but when pressed, innocent people do not usually speak in dramatic metaphors about fire and burning bridges. They ask questions about what happened." Lucy sat back in her chair. "What will you do with it?" "I shall have it sent to Inspector Graves discreetly. He may wish to have his laboratory tested for residues." She sipped her tea thoughtfully, then added, "But in the meantime, I should like to visit the arcade again. I have developed a sudden curiosity about the mall's lost in property department. At Harrington Arcade, the giant Christmas tree stood slightly dimmer than before, as if even the decorations were in mourning for the event that had taken place beneath them." Miss Marple walked alone this time. Lucy had her own errands to run. The lost and found office was tucked away behind the main management suite. an unloved little alcove staffed by a bored-looking young woman wearing a thick wool scarf indoors. "Good morning," Miss Marple began sweetly. "I wonder if a friend of mine might have left something here yesterday." A small envelope, possibly unmarked. The girl looked apologetic. "We don't usually log plain envelopes unless they have obvious valuables inside." "Love." Still, Miss Marple persisted, smiling her most harmless old lady smile. "I wonder if I might just take a very quick look myself." The woman hesitated, then shrugged and gestured towards a plastic sorting tray on the counter behind her. "We sort everything out weekly, but those are just from the last few days." Miss Marple glanced over the contents of the tray. There were sets of keys, lonely gloves, woolly scarves, a child's plastic wallet, and then, tucked beneath a folded shopping list, she saw an envelope, unsealed. No name on the front. She lifted it delicately, with gloved fingers. "Mind if I?" The girl shrugged again, already looking at her phone. "Go ahead." Inside the envelope was a single sheet of standard printer paper, torn roughly at the edges, as if ripped hurriedly from a larger notepad. The text was typed, not handwritten. It read, "If anything happens to me, check the numbers in the audit report. Page 6. It is all there under Harrington Trust Fund." There was no name, no signature, but the phrasing was unmistakable. It was a dead man's switch. Miss Marple carefully folded the paper back into the envelope and tucked it securely into her handbag. Inspector Graves looked up from his cluttered desk when she entered his office later that afternoon. "I had a feeling I'd see you again today," he said, leaning back in his chair. Miss Marple placed the envelope gently on his desk. "I believe this was meant to be found eventually, Inspector, but perhaps not quite by accident in a lost and found bin." Graves read the note silently, his brow furrowing deeply. "Harrington Trust Fund. That's connected to the mall's community grant scheme, isn't it?" "I believe so. It is a charitable initiative handled by the same financial firm Mr. Haynes worked for." Graves stood up abruptly and crossed to a metal filing cabinet. "We actually received a copy of the Bray and Plot annual audit report this morning." Routine background check. He retrieved a thick folder and flipped through it rapidly. "Page 6. Here it is." He turned the open report towards her. Miss Marple scanned the dense columns of figures. "Column 3, she pointed out, her finger hovering over the paper. "See the repeat entries?" Graves frowned, squinting at the small print. Same amounts listed twice under different transaction codes. "Looks like a simple data entry mistake, until you realize the amounts aren't actually identical. They differ by a single decimal point placed further down the line, just enough to avoid detection in a casual review. Someone was laundering significant funds through the charity trust," Graves muttered, realization dawning. "Indeed," Miss Marple said, "and I suspect Mr. Haynes intended to reveal exactly that." Graves rubbed his temple, a headache building. "We'll need to trace the original account holders for these transactions," Miss Marple's voice soft. "Who had access to the trust's detailed financial records, Inspector?" "Only 3 people, according to the firm," Graves replied. "Haynes himself, of course, a junior analyst named Dana Crowley, and the firm's external client liaison officer. He flipped back through his notes to confirm the name Mrs. Judith Kian. Miss Marple's hands folded neatly in her lap. Then it seems two people may have had a very strong motive after all. That evening, a quiet, hesitant knock echoed at Miss Marple's front door. Lucy went to answer it and returned a moment later, looking visibly rattled. "It's Mrs. Keene, Aunt Jane. She's asking for you." Miss Marple met her in the small sitting room. Mrs. Keene's professional composure had completely cracked. Her eyes were redrimmed from crying, and her breath smelled faintly of expensive brandy. "I can't sleep," she whispered, refusing the offer of a seat. "It's all I can think about. Christopher Haynes dying right there in that lift, and now the police are asking questions about the trust fund records." Miss Marple said nothing. She just waited in the quiet room. "I didn't kill him," Mrs. Keene said, her voice sudden and firm. "You must believe that." "Miss Marple, I believe you are very afraid, my dear," Miss Marple replied gently. Mrs. Keene sank onto the sofa, her hands trembling in her lap. "Christopher knew something. He came to me last week. He said there were serious inconsistencies in the grant withdrawals. He said someone had deliberately changed the entries after the official audit was filed." "And what did you do?" "I told him to take it straight to the board of directors, but he said he couldn't. He said someone on the board was involved in the scheme. He didn't say who it was." "Did you agree to meet him at Brew and Bow yesterday?" Miss Marple asked. She flinched visibly. "No. I was supposed to meet him there, yes. But I backed out at the last minute. I couldn't be seen with him. My ex-husband already suspects I'm hiding something from him." Miss Marple tilted her head, studying the younger woman. "And are you hiding something, Judith?" There was a long, heavy pause. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked loudly. "I skimmed," Judith whispered finally, staring at the floor. "Years ago, just after my divorce, I was drowning in legal fees and trying to keep the toy shop afloat. I fixed the numbers in the trust temporarily. I repaid every single penny of it later. I thought it was buried forever. But then someone else discovered what you had done." Miss Marple finished for her. "Yes. And they are using it now, twisting it." Her voice broke into a sob. "I think someone killed Christopher just to keep him from talking about it. Did Mr. Haynes leave any copies of his report with you?" Mrs. Keene shook her head violently. "No. He said he had mailed a copy to himself via registered post to prove the timeline of his discovery. But he told me the envelope never arrived." Miss Marple leaned forward intently. "Was it addressed to his office or his home?" "His flat, I believe, in Chestnut Row." Miss Marple stood up smoothly. "Then I suggest we visit his flat immediately, before someone else does." Chestnut Row was a quiet, curving street, tucked away behind the parish church, its windows lit by warm yellow lamps and modest Christmas wreaths. Miss Marple and Lucy stood beside Inspector Graves as he used a spare key retrieved from the station to open the late Mr. Haynes's front door. The flat was modest and scrupulously clean. A kettle was still sitting full on the hob, ready for a tea. That was never made. A half-written Christmas card addressed to someone named Claire sat on the small dining table. They searched the flat in silence. It was Lucy who found the envelope, Taped beneath the bottom drawer of the dresser, she said breathlessly, holding it up. He really hid it. Inside was a second copy of the audit report. It was heavily highlighted and annotated in red ink. One specific entry was circled several times. Harrington Trust disbursed via West Bank Legal Fund. See client IDFD12A. Graves narrowed his eyes at the paper. FD12A. That looks like a client number, not a person's initials. But Miss Marple was already shaking her head slowly. No, Inspector. I believe in this instance, it is both. She looked up at him. Francis Doran. The next morning brought with it a brittle, hard frost that silvered the hedges along Milchester's High Street and turned every footstep into a loud crunch. Inside his warm office at the town police station, Inspector Graves paced back and forth, the annotated audit report clutched tightly in his hand. Miss Marple sat in the corner vista chair, quietly knitting a beige scarf. So, Francis Doran was siphoning money through the Harrington Trust using a falsified client ID, Graves said, thinking aloud. Christopher Haynes found out, likely confronted him about it, and then ended up dead for his trouble. Miss Marple's needles clicked gently in the quiet room. That seems clear, but you still lack proof that Doran actually delivered the poison. Graves stopped pacing. You said yourself that porcelain rabbit from his shop had chemical residue on it. It connects him to digitoxin. Yes, Miss Marple corrected gently, but it does not connect him directly to the act of murder, and certainly not to a motive strong enough. To kill embezzlement is one thing, murder is quite another. Unless we uncover more to link them. Graves tossed the audit report onto his desk in frustration. So, we're still just dancing in circles around the truth. Not quite, Inspector, Miss Marple said calmly. We now know exactly what Haynes was trying to reveal, but we have not yet asked ourselves who else knew about it. Graves frowned. You think someone else saw the report? Besides Haynes and Judith Keene. I think, she replied, that someone anticipated its fallout at Wonder World Toys. Mrs. Keene stood alone behind the counter, trying desperately to tie a decorative satin ribbon around the neck of a large plush bear. Her hands were trembling so violently she couldn't make the knot hold. When Lucy entered the shop, Judith looked up with strained politeness. I'm here for the donation forms, Lucy said cheerfully, pretending not to notice the other woman's distress. The ones for the Christmas charity drive. You mentioned them the other day. Oh, yes, of course. Mrs. Keene rummaged distractedly beneath the counter, retrieving a plastic sleeve of printed sheets. As she handed them across, a small, red-covered notebook slipped from the pile and landed at Lucy's feet. Oh, let me get that, Mrs. Keene began quickly, reaching down, but Lucy had already bent to retrieve it. The title embossed in gold on the front cover read, Annual Sponsorship Ledger, Harrington Trust. Lucy blinked, holding the book. I thought these official records were supposed to be kept secure at the Bray and Plot offices. Mrs. Keene hesitated for a moment, looking panicked, then took the book back with forced calm. It's just a personal copy, dear. I use it to track what comes in and out for the shop's donations. Nothing formal. Lucy smiled brightly. Still seems very organized of you. Christopher would have approved, I'm sure. Mrs. Keene didn't respond. Her eyes had gone distant and glassy again. Later that afternoon, Miss Marple and Lucy met in a quiet tea room near the church. Lucy stirred honey into her tea briskly. She is definitely hiding something, Aunt Jane. That ledger was no personal copy. It looked official. I agree, Miss Marple said. But the more interesting question is, why keep such a sensitive document at the toy shop? Lucy leaned in closer across the table. Maybe she knew someone was looking for it at the offices. Miss Marple's pale gaze sharpened. Or perhaps she was afraid of what someone might do if they found it missing from its proper place. She paused, taking a sip of tea. Tell me again, Lucy, about that anonymous complaint your friend mentioned. The one about financial irregularities. It was filed a week before the murder. Dropped off at the mall management office. Unsigned. Miss Marple tapped her fingers lightly against her saucer. And who, my dear, manages the mall's office correspondence? Lucy's brow furrowed as she thought, the mall secretary, I believe. A young woman named Dana Crowley. Miss Marple smiled faintly. The junior analyst from Bray. And Plot. The very same one? Then, I believe we ought to speak with Miss Crowley. Dana Crowley had the tight, overworked look of a young woman trying desperately to stay afloat in a job that was too demanding for its pay grade. She wore large, thick-rimmed glasses and a cardigan that was spilling at the elbows. Her desk in the mall's cramped back office was stacked high with forms, manila folders, and at least 3 half-drunk cups of cold coffee. Miss Marple and Lucy were shown in by a security guard without much enthusiasm. Sorry, Dana said, barely glancing up from her computer screen. If this is about the raffle cleanup, you'll need to speak to the events team. I just do the paperwork. Miss Marple stepped forward. Actually, Miss Crowley, I believe you also processed an anonymous complaint last week regarding a discrepancy in the trust fund accounts. Dana stiffened, visibly in her chair. That information is confidential, she said quickly. Of course, Miss Marple said gently. But now that there has been a death connected to it, perhaps it is not quite so confidential anymore. Dana swallowed hard. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt, she whispered at last, her voice trembling. I only flagged what looked wrong in the system. There were entries that didn't match the old audit logs from 6 months ago. Why not sign your name to the complaint if it was legitimate? Dana looked away, staring at the wall. Because I wasn't supposed to have access to those old records in the first place. I kept copies to study at home so I could learn how to format the reports properly. If the firm found out I'd been accessing archived files without authorization, I would have been fired on the spot. Miss Marple nodded sympathetically. You tried to do the right thing, Miss Crowley, albeit in a roundabout way. But tell me, did anyone else know you had made that complaint? I don't know, Dana said miserably. Maybe. I left it in the physical Dropbox outside the office on a Tuesday evening. I think I saw someone else at the end of the corridor when I was leaving. Who did you see? Dana hesitated, biting her lip. I think it was Mr. Doran. But I couldn't be sure, and I didn't want to make wild accusations. Miss Marple offered her a kind, reassuring smile. You didn't make an accusation, my dear. You merely made an observation. That evening, back at the bungalow, Miss Marple sat beside the fireplace with a fresh page open in her notebook, her fountain pen moving slowly across the paper. Frances Doran had direct access to the funds and was embezzling. Judith Keene had guilt from past missteps that could be used against her. Dana Crowley had knowledge of the crime but lacked the power to act openly. And Christopher Haynes had tried to bring the truth into the open with a hidden letter, a secret audit copy, and a registered envelope that never arrived at its destination. Unless Miss Marple's eyes narrowed suddenly, she rose from her chair, crossed to where her coat hung by the door, and retrieved the envelope they had found in Haynes's flat. It was still folded. She ran her sensitive fingers across the corner of the paper. There, nearly invisible beneath the gummed flap, was a small indentation. It was a number. Ah, God. Not a postage barcode, but something else entirely. A locker tag number. The next morning, Lucy accompanied her aunt to the shopping arcade once again. They walked past the shops to the new click and collect wall, a recent installation featuring dozens of numbered metal locker doors and a screen for scanning QR codes. Miss Marple showed the young clerk at the assistant's desk the number indented on the envelope. "That's from a few days ago," the clerk confirmed, tapping on his screen. "Whatever is in there, no one has picked it up yet. We don't open them without the collection ID, I'm afraid." Miss Marple leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I believe the intended recipient is deceased, young man, and this locker may contain the final piece of a puzzle regarding his death." The young man hesitated, looked at her serious face, and then went to fetch his supervisor. 10 minutes later, with Inspector Graves summoned and present, the locker was opened. Inside lay a plain manila envelope, addressed in Christopher Haynes's careful, methodical typewriting. Inside that envelope was yet another copy of the audit report, and tucked into the folds of the report was a photograph. It was a grainy picture, taken in a dimly lit pub. It showed Frances Doran and a distinguished-looking, older man, a member of the Harrington Trust Board, seated together at a small table. They were counting out a thick stack of cash between them. A third man, Christopher Haynes himself, was visible in the background reflection of a mirror, holding up a phone camera at chest level to capture this scene surreptitiously. The digital timestamp on the photo was dated 3 days before the murder. Graves exhaled slowly, a long plume of breath in the cold air. "That's it. That's the proof." Miss Marple's expression remained unreadable as she studied the photo. "A backup plan," she murmured, "in case the other methods failed to bring the truth to light." Lucy shivered, hugging her arms. So, he knew someone would come after him for what he found. Miss Marple looked at the image one last time, her eyes sad. He knew someone already had. Inspector Graves sat alone in his office under the stark light of his desk lamp, turning the photograph slowly in his hands, as if expecting it to speak and confess. Behind him, the hum of the central heating mingled with the faint sound of carol singers outside on the street, jarring reminder that it was Christmas Eve. It certainly didn't feel like it. Miss Marple entered without knocking, carrying a small brown envelope. "Graves," she said gently, "I have made a list." He didn't look up from the photo. "A list of what?" "Of everyone who had permitted access to the mall's cafe stockroom last week, including access to the supply of fresh porcelain teacups. Now, that got his attention. He sat up and reached for the list. Staff, cleaners, delivery drivers, he read. He paused at one name, and Judith Keene. She managed all vendor inventories for the businesses sponsored by the trust, Miss Marple confirmed. And, importantly, she signed off on the refreshments for the raffle event itself. Graves gave a grim nod. And Doran, he wouldn't have been allowed behind the counters. No. But Judith would have been. He sighed heavily and leaned back in his creaking chair. So, we are left with a photograph tying Doran to a bribery scheme, a poisoned man, and a woman in the toy shop who has lied by omission repeatedly. Miss Marple looked thoughtful. Judith is protecting someone, Inspector. The question remaining is, who? Graves frowned. You don't think it's Doran anymore? I think Doran is guilty of embezzlement, she said firmly, but not of murder. Then who? Miss Marple's eyes drifted to the window. Outside, festive garlands fluttered in the cold wind. Someone Christopher trusted enough to meet in public. Someone who could approach his table without arousing suspicion. And someone with easy access to that specific cup. Graves stiffened. The cafe staff themselves. Miss Marple hesitated. Possibly. But there is one other name we have not yet examined fully. Who? Dana Crowley. Graves blinked in surprise. The junior analyst. But she blew the whistle. She filed the complaint. Yes, and she knew about the audit entries. She knew the office layout. She was in the corridor the night the envelope disappeared. And most importantly, she knew Christopher's habits, his routines. Perhaps even that he would go to that specific cafe before the raffle. She's just a junior clerk, Graves said, unconvinced. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Junior staff are often the most overlooked people in any organization, Inspector, especially by those they work closest with. That evening, Lucy accompanied Miss Marple on a short walk through the village square. The air was crisp and cold. The sky bruised purple with heavy snow clouds. Candles flickered in cottage windows. Church bells rang out softly on the breeze. "Do you really think Dana did it?" Lucy asked, her breath clouding in the frosty air. "She had motive," Miss Marple said. She feared exposure if Christopher had realized she had access to those archived records, illegally, however innocently she may have intended. It could have ruined her entire career before it even began. But would she kill for that? It seems extreme. Miss Marple's tone was calm and sad. Perhaps not all at once, but fear is a powerful motivator, Lucy. Especially if she thought others might take the fall for it. Lucy was quiet for a moment, listening to the snow start to fall. "People are strange in groups," she murmured. "All this noise about raffles and garlands, while a man dies 20 feet away, and nobody notices." Miss Marple nodded. "And in all that noise, my dear, the quietest hands can move unseen." On Christmas morning, Inspector Graves invited Dana Crowley down to the station under the pretext of finalizing her witness statement. She arrived early, her cheeks flushed red from the cold, her oversized coat making her look small and vulnerable. "Would you care for some tea?" Graves asked politely. She hesitated, looking nervous. "No, thank you." He motioned to the chair across from his desk. "Just a few follow-up questions. Miss Crowley, won't take long." Dana sat down and folded her hands tightly in her lap. "Of course." Graves opened a file slowly, letting the silence stretch. "You mentioned seeing Mr. Doran in the corridor the evening you submitted your anonymous report." "Yes, I did." "Did you mention seeing him to anyone else at the time?" "No." He looked up sharply. "You're quite sure about that?" A flicker of irritation passed across her face. "Yes." "Why?" "Because the mall's security system logs show that your own access card wasn't used that night to enter the admin corridor. In fact, the last recorded use of your card was 3 days earlier." Dana blinked rapidly. I used the side door. It must have been propped open by the cleaner." Miss Marple, who had been standing quietly in the corner of the office, finally spoke up. "That is highly unlikely, my dear. The fire doors in that corridor are alarmed. More regulations." Dana turned towards her, her composure cracking. "You don't know what it's like being invisible in that office, doing twice the work for none of the credit. Christopher, he promised to mentor me. But then he just shut me out completely, because he discovered the irregularities you had found," Miss Marple said gently. Dana's voice trembled. "I was just trying to fix things. Doran and that board member in the photo, they were the real criminals. I thought if I flagged the inconsistencies anonymously, someone else higher up would catch them. But then Christopher found out you'd used archived records without permission to find the proof," Graves said, "and threatened to report you." Dana hesitated, tears welling up. "He said I needed to be careful, that the board would turn on me to protect themselves, that I could lose my position for breaching protocol. So you panicked," Graves said flatly. Dana looked away, tears spilling over. "I didn't mean to kill him. I just ... I wanted to scare him off, to delay things so I could figure out what to do. I'd heard about... I read about it online. I thought a small dose, just enough to make him ill, keep him away from the office for a few days. But it wasn't a small dose, was it?" Graves said. Dana's voice cracked into a sob. "I didn't know how much to use. I didn't realize." Miss Marple stepped forward. "And you used the cafe sticker. You planted it there for him, knowing he would go there." Dana buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I thought no one would notice the cup. They'd just blame Doran because of the arguments." Graves nodded slowly, then stood up. "Dana Crowley, I am placing you under arrest for the murder of Christopher Haynes." As the sobbing young woman was led away by a female constable, Miss Marple remained perfectly still in the corner, her eyes following her sadly. Later, that Christmas Day, as the village settled into its quiet afternoon routine of roast dinners and family gatherings, Miss Marple and Lucy sat beside the fire in the bungalow. A tin of butter biscuits was open between them, and the wireless was playing carols softly in the background. "So," Lucy said quietly, It was Dana all along. Not for money. Not out of malice. Just ... fear. Miss Marple nodded. The fear of falling from a ladder she had barely begun to climb. And Doran, he's guilty too, isn't he? Guilty of embezzlement. Yes, he will face significant consequences for that, but not a prison sentence for murder, I suspect. Lucy? Sigurd, watching the flames in the hearth. Still, it feels strange. Like the mall won't ever really feel festive again after this. Miss Marple sipped her tea. That is the thing about truth, Lucy. It rarely restores what it uncovers, but it does prevent repetition. Outside the window, snow began to fall again, soft, steady, and clean, covering the tracks of the last few days. Boxing Day dawned with a hashmufu. The fresh snowfall had blanketed Milchester in a muffled stillness. The shops along the high street remained shuttered. A Christmas wreath hung crookedly outside the Harrington Arcade, its bright ribbons faded after weeks in the winter. Wind. At the West Met bungalow, Miss Marple stood at the stove, stirring a large pot of porridge. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your night. May you find deep peace and restful sleep. Wishing you the sweetest dreams. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.